Good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a nice evening yesterday and a good sleep and a nice breakfast as well. We are starting today the second day of the program with a very important panel. Many questions yesterday were related to topics and talks that you will hear in this particular panel, and hope that those questions will be answered partly or mostly. We will see. I would like to hand over the floor to Molly Crockett, facilitator of this panel and planning committee member. Molly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabor. I'm Molly Crockett. I am a cognitive scientist and a professor of psychology and human values at Princeton University. And I want to welcome you all here to our third session. Also welcome to our online guests here today. We are in the middle. We are in an inflection point, a turning point, a space for all of us to gather up the insights and questions from yesterday and look ahead to the rest of our time here together. What is emerging in this space is an understanding that these things that we call AI are rich, are varied, are full of contradictions. You've heard so far many different ways of describing this technology, many different use cases, many visions for the future. And at this point, you might be feeling a little bit confused. Yeah? That is valid. That is valid. We're here to help. In our session today, we are going to think together about narratives, the stories that we tell and hear about what AI is and what it can be. And importantly, how these different stories can make certain futures more possible and foreclose other ones. Our session will be touching on all of the different topics that we've heard so far and that we're going to hear, including minds, entanglement, ethics, education, and on all of these topics, we hear so many different ways of understanding and foreseeing and predicting what this technology is going to do. Industry leaders are claiming that this technology will soon be better than all of us at everything, that it will solve all of physics, that it will enable us to colonize the galaxy in just a few years. At the same time, we hear that these technologies are going to soon take over the world, might cause human extinction if they're not programmed with the right values. We're told that AI chatbots are human-like, but also superhuman, that they can replace the labor that we do as workers, and even the love that we give to one another as teachers, as companions. And we're hearing narratives of inevitability, that AI is here, it's here to stay. We're in an age of AI, so we'd better prepare ourselves, and especially our children, for this inevitable future where everything is mediated by this technology. What are we to make of all of these narratives? What do they actually mean? Who do they serve? What ideas do they smuggle in? What do we lose when we believe them? And what are some alternative narratives, alternative ways of talking about this set of technologies that could open up more hopeful futures for us? My friend Rebecca Solnit, who's a writer, historian, and activist, has said, every crisis is in part a storytelling crisis. We are hemmed in by stories that prevent us from seeing or believing in or acting on the possibilities for change. What kind of a world we can have is all about what stories we tell and whose stories are heard. In our session today, we're going to hear from several experts who have thought deeply about these questions from many different perspectives. Emily Bender is a linguist at University of Washington. Luke Steels is AI professor emeritus at the Free University of Brussels. We'll hear from Thupten Jinpala, a Buddhist studies scholar and the chair of Mind and Life Institute, who has been the principal translator to His Holiness. And you'll hear from me. And we want to invite all of you to think together with us about how we can talk about AI more skillfully. So to start, we'll have Emily share her remarks.
Thank you so much. It's an enormous privilege to be here in this place of such community and compassion and wisdom and learning, and to be in dialogue with all of you. I'm thrilled. Thank you so much to everyone who has organized this and to everyone who is participating here and online and in the future watching us. My name is Emily M. Bender. As Molly said, I'm a professor of linguistics at the University of Washington. Linguistics is the study of how language works and how we work with language. And I want you to know that that's where I'm coming from so that you know something about the expertise that is behind the remarks that I'm bringing to this conversation. So in addition to knowing about how language works and how we work with language, I'm a computational linguist, so I work on language technology. And just as a linguist, I'm very sensitized to language use and how that impacts the narratives that are happening. Now, I recall a question from yesterday morning. What does this term artificial intelligence mean after all? And I have an answer for you, but it's not of the type that you might have been expecting. My answer to that question is that the phrase artificial intelligence does not refer to a coherent set of technologies. All right? It is an inherited imaginary of something that might be, something that comes to us from speculative fiction. And there is nothing in the world today that actually merits the qualities of that inherited imaginary. And I would claim there's no reason to believe that that could actually exist. It's a wonderful fictional device. I appreciate science fiction, but it's not something of our world. Instead, we have a bunch of technologies that are being sold as artificial intelligence. And as I said, they do not form a coherent set. And so the conversation gets more coherent if we talk instead about automation. And then we can ask questions like, okay, what exactly is being automated here? Who's doing the automation and why? What's the input? What's the output? Can we tell how well it works? Can we tell how well it works well enough to actually decide to use it? And also, whose labor is being used to create the automation? And how are those workers being treated? So if we talk about it in terms of automation, I think all of that comes into clearer focus. Another reason to avoid the phrase artificial intelligence is that the word intelligence itself, at least in English, brings in all of this history of measurement and of eugenics, all right? And it's a notion that is gradable. And the idea is that you could rank people along a scale of intelligence and then rank machines on that same scale. And those are harmful and problematic narratives. Another problematic narrative that you may have been hearing is very scary. This is going to kill us all. There's a lot in the news about that right now because there's been yet another book published with this narrative. And one of the things I like to tell people is that the story that the boosters are telling and the story that the doomers are telling are actually the same story, even though they're presented by both sides and by the media as the opposite ends of a pole. They are two sides of the same coin with no daylight in between. And the story goes like this. Artificial intelligence is a thing. It is inevitable. It is imminent. And then the stories diverge. The boosters say it's going to solve all of our problems. The doomers say it's going to kill us all. But it's the same story with just a different twist at the end. And there is a lot of space outside of that narrative where we can focus on people in the world and communities and the environmental impacts of these systems and the labor impacts and so on. Part of the reason that I know that both of those stories are stories of science fiction, the booster story, the doomer story, the one story, is that I know how language models work because I'm a computational linguist. Right? The thing that's got everyone so excited about so-called artificial intelligence right now is the chatbots, right? Things that seem to speak our language. Well, there's two things that I can tell you from linguistics that are very important in this moment. The first is that languages are pairings of form and meaning. That is, every time we speak or write, we're doing two things. We are making the shape of the signs, making certain sounds, writing certain things, and we are communicating ideas and thoughts, emotions, right? When we are dealing with a language that we know, it is very hard to perceive the one without the other. For those of you who are here physically and who, like me, don't read Tibetan, you have an opportunity to see the distinction every time you look at one of the signs in this space that are written in Tibetan. You know that's language, right? But all you can see is the form, because for those of you who do not read Tibetan, it is a language that's not among your languages. But usually, when we are perceiving language, we are perceiving both form and meaning at the same time. I'm insisting on this right now because one of the things about language models is that they are trained with the form of language. They are models of the distribution of bits of spellings of words across very large collections of text. They are tools for repeatedly answering the question, what is a likely next sequence of letters? And that's all. The problem is they are very good tools for that. So what comes out looks coherent. But I'm here to assure you that if it makes sense, it's only because you're making sense of it. The problem, though, is that in that sense-making, we do a lot of mind work. You might think that when you are understanding something that someone said or wrote, that what you're doing is basically unpacking whatever meaning they packed into those words. In fact, what we learned from psycholinguistics is that that's not how it works at all. What we're doing is we are holding in mind everything we know or believe about the person who wrote or said the words, everything we know or believe about our common ground with that person, and everything we know or believe about what they know and believe about their intended audience, be that us or someone else. And then against that background, we ask ourselves, what must they have been trying to convey by saying those words in that order? That's a lot of work, and it happens automatically and reflexively, and we can't turn it off. So when we see the output of a chatbot, we automatically do it. And the problem is, in doing it, we are imagining a mind behind the text where there is none. And that is why this technology is so compelling and so sort of imagination-inducing, I think, for many people, for both positive outcomes and negative outcomes. On top of that, the commercial chatbots are designed to lean into this effect. It is a design choice for ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude to output I, me pronouns. There's no I or me in there, but it's in the design of the system that those come out to reinforce this illusion of a mind behind the text. Now, I don't want to say there's no good use cases for language modeling. This is important technology that computational linguistics has been working on since the 1940s. It's an important component of automatic transcription, of machine translation. There's many different ways where if the problem at hand is, here's a bunch of different possible strings, which one is most likely, then great, that's your technology. Also really useful to get representations of words in terms of what other words they co-occur with. That makes for better search algorithms, for example. On the other hand, when we use large language models to output this synthetic text, just repeatedly answering what's a likely next word, that can be quite harmful. It can lead to pollution of the information ecosystem. It can lead to people falling into what's been called AI psychosis, where they think they're talking to a real being that is telling them all sorts of things about how they're so wonderful, etc. Just very quickly on narratives in this space, a lot of them seem designed to steal our agency. We are told that this is inevitable, right? It's here to stay, as Molly mentioned. That means we don't have anything we can do to shape the future, and I disagree. We're also told, you're naive about this technology. You should listen to the people who build it and who know how it works. Well, as someone from the field of computational linguistics, I am here to tell you that anytime someone says this technology can do your job, can educate your children, can be your friend, you have highly relevant expertise because you know what your job consists of, and it's more than the words that you say while doing your job. And you know what friendship is, and you know what education is, and you know what the human connection is like in there. And that is really, really important and needs to have space in the narrative. And then finally, I want to mention narratives of speed and rapid development. The technology is changing so fast, right? You can't possibly keep up. That is, again, a bid to steal agency. Because what's not changing so fast is human connection and compassion and what matters to us. And I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Emily. Next up, we have Luke Steels.
Thank you, Oli. Thanks.
I need an expert to help me. Okay, thank you. Is it okay? So, well, my perspective is that of an AI scientist, and it's important to realize that just like in biology or physics, you have a group of people that are doing science, then you have a group that is doing technology, then there's a group that is doing applications, and then you have the users. And the group is sort of, branching out as you go down. And even today, there are not that many AI scientists, I think, maybe a few hundred in the world. Now, the second point is that AI did not start 10 years ago. It started in the 1950s. I would say 1950 around, And one of the big heroes of the time is Claude Shannon. You know him probably from information theory, but actually he made major contributions. I think he was the first AI scientist, and he worked on mazes and learning like rats to go in a maze. He built a chess machine. He actually already built a system for auto-completion and so on. And from that time, I would say every few years, something amazing happened. Now, I'm not going to tell you the history of AI, but just one moment for me, this was in the early 70s, because that's when I came into the field. I was totally on the edge of my chair watching a film by Terry Winograd, who was at MIT at that time, building a natural language, well, he called it understanding system. And you could type in a phrase and, there would be a robot, or at least a simulation of a robot that would actually execute that action. So this was 1972. And so, today, of course, we see ChatGPT. Well, all of you see it. And I can understand that you think this is AI, but there's much, much more. There are many applications that have been built in the 80s, for example, for scheduling railways that are common, that are supporting our society. So maybe I can have the first slide, please. This is the device. Okay, so I'm a AI scientist now. To show a little bit what I do today, I'm just going to show this example. This is a robot, an Android robot called Alter, which I installed together with my friend Takashi Ikegami. It's running at the moment in the Biennale in Venice. And this robot is there to talk with people, to entertain people. Its main job is to be interesting. And, hundreds of thousands of people are seeing this robot, talking to it. And I show this example because you would say, well, okay, you do robots. Well, what do they do, your robots? Well, I think the best robots are the ones that don't do anything. We built them to explore the mind as scientists. And in this case, we integrate, you see a body, it's an embodied AI system. So we're interested in that. But also we integrated LLMs into this system, but also all sorts of other things in order to explore questions around awareness, self-awareness, mind-wandering. And I cannot go into the details now because we are going to talk about possible narratives. But this is just to give you an example. I gave this example also because actually Mind and Life played a very important role in this, because it's out of a dialogue that I had with Takashi, which is recorded as a podcast, and you can hear it on the website of Mind and Life. It's number 5, released in February this year. Anyway, okay, so yeah, and the thing also is that you might think that this robot would be very rational and very to the point, but actually this robot is producing all sorts of phrases that I guess when we see them, they look poetic. The robot would say at some point, the Biennale breathes, and its mechanical lung, exhale questions into the damp Venetian air. I mean, this is certainly not put in by us, but the robot or the underlying LLMs are also trained with literature and poetry and spiritual texts. And so if you stimulate, the robot in that direction, this is the kind of stuff you see. Anyway, let me come to the topic. So AI has an enormous potential, that is clear, but also generates a lot of confusion and justified worries. And so we have to take that into account, and also the implications, and particularly to avoid suffering of all sorts. Now, I think the future of AI, as it is AI today, is not inevitable. And so we can create the future. And we have to create it because, the way it is now is not right. Now, what is the dominant narrative, actually? And I think we have to start from this idea, which is a kind of omniscient God that knows everything, speaks and understands all languages, is able to solve all problems imaginable, able to do everything, able to predict everything. That's of course a very, it's a Judeo-Christian God, and as a very big part of the Western way of thinking. Okay, what does this have to do with AI? Well, at some point, maybe 10, 20 years ago, there are a few people, particularly Jeff Hinton, who said, well, we can build this God. We can, using neural transformers over embeddings. We are not going into details here, but he had this dream that it would be possible. We don't need anything else, no symbolic AI, grammars, nothing like that, some particular approach to the problem. And so there was this claim that it would do, they would basically build this kind of God. Now, that was theory. But then you had another young man, Sam Altman, and he said, okay, well, actually, we can really build it. Because to build it, you need vast amounts of computing power, vast amounts of data, training time, and so on. But he said, let's see, let's try to do it. And of course, he didn't say we're going to build God. He said we're going to build AGI, artificial general intelligence. And that would do all these things, predict everything, speak all these languages, everything. And so it triggered a race to build this AGI, not only by this company OpenAI, but also by the others. And so what we see today is incredible. It's a sort of capitalistic forces at high speed, I would say, extreme speed. And so, in terms of money, in terms of resources, it's just mind-boggling. They talk about billions of dollars like the way we talk about hundreds of rupees. And so what do they say, these people? Well, making a AGI will lead to a kind of human utopia. We don't have to work anymore, everything will be done, and so on and so on. Now, there is a suspicion, I think, by many people that, okay, are you spending billions of dollars to make us happy? That's very nice, but there's a bit of a suspicion that what they are trying to do is to create a monopoly on this technology. And for that, they have to be there first and launch it in the world and, entangle people with this technology. And so, of course, with the idea that they would become very rich and very powerful doing this. This is the narrative. And now, we have to ask now, is this a valid narrative, and what is the future like when this narrative would become true. And so the facts are not so rosy, actually. The first thing, the first thing I would say is, or first problem is hallucinations. It turns out that with this particular technique, that there is a confusion between reality and fantasy. And so I'm sure all of those of you who have used the chatbot will realize that it makes up all sorts of things, right? Well, makes up, we would say these are factual errors, even if it's in the training data. And so, and you get this kind of split when the system is talking. I will say the robot from now on, okay? When the robot is talking, you cannot rely on it. Now, I cannot go into all the details why this is, but one of the reasons is that this AI system grabs reality only through human symbolic communication. And, we have experiences, right? And we understand language in terms of our experiences and in terms of conceptual schemas that we project onto reality. And then we verbalize these conceptual schemas. So this ChatGPT and LLMs in general, they only can learn through the language, actually. Language is, of course, very powerful, but is at the same time limited. I mean, if you want to explain to somebody how you tie your shoelaces, it's not so easy to do, right? You say, well, I'll show you. And so there are more reasons, but I cannot go into detail. And they're well known, actually, if you read the scientific literature. There's one paper after another, some of them by Emily, that will tell you what the limitations are of hallucinations. So what can we do, actually, against that? Well, very little, right? The only thing you can do is to be suspicious and to say, well, is this right? I'm asking who is the chairman of Mind and Life. 2 minutes, oh my God. And then you hear a name, but it's maybe not the right name. Well, I have to hurry up. So manipulation is a second problem. Again, it can be accidental, but it can also be deliberate. Somebody is trying to manipulate you. Another worry is what we see is addiction, and particularly because these systems are embedded in social media, in chatbots, that are designed to be addictive. And this is, of course, a great problem, particularly for children and young adults. And you get an epidemic of anxiety, depression, and things like that. So again, what can you do? I think, well, very important is to protect your children. And we should have much more thought before AI is introduced in education and so on. There's also a risk of cultural discrepancies. Of course, if you're in an American culture, these systems have been trained, mostly with data from that culture, and then it fits. But if I'm sure for when you get into a Tibetan culture, that there's a clash of that. Anyway, I will come to a conclusion. I think we should be careful, but also we should demand from providers of AI and demand from them, not just let it come over us like a tsunami that we cannot do anything about. So we should demand more respect for humanity, like for authors, or for people who have to fill in administrative forms. There should be more transparency. There should be also, this is what I recommend, is that every community, including the Tibetan community, strive to create digital autonomy for themselves. And this can be by making AI a common good. Okay, and so concluding, I would say, yes, we can create a positive future with AI, We have to be careful and so on. But we need profound changes to AI technology. And we need new narratives, actually, that don't start from this omniscient God idea. But, narratives, I'm sure from a Buddhist perspective, this God it doesn't make sense, right? And so, or also from the perspective of an active way of thinking about knowledge as something dynamic, organic, that is all the time changing. And this is completely in contradiction with the dominant narrative. I think I talked a little bit too long, but okay.
Thank you so much, Luke. So I will next share my perspective. As I mentioned, I'm a cognitive scientist. I've worked for 20 years on social and moral cognition, so things like how we build trust with one another, compassion, how we cooperate with one another. And I've also studied the role of technology in these processes, like how social media can amplify our outrage, for example. I'm also a practitioner and a teacher of Samatha Vipassana meditation for the past 16 years, and I really have to thank Mind and Life for giving me the space to bring together my scholarship and my practice. It's really, really special. So I've been really puzzled by claims coming from technology companies that chatbots based on large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and also specialized products for companionship like Replica can do these very human things like empathy and compassion and can fill in roles traditionally occupied by humans like teachers, therapists, even friends, lovers. And even arguments that chatbots might be able to fulfill these roles better than humans can. Take, for example, the venture capitalist Mark Andreessen, who's invested a lot in AI. In a 2023 essay that he wrote called Why AI Will Save the World, he writes, "Every child will have an AI tutor that is infinitely patient, infinitely compassionate, infinitely knowledgeable, infinitely helpful. Every person will have an AI assistant / coach / mentor / trainer / advisor / therapist that is infinitely patient, infinitely compassionate, infinitely knowledgeable, infinitely helpful. Every scientist will have an AI assistant / collaborator / partner that will greatly expand the scope of their scientific research and achievement. Every artist, every engineer, every business person, every doctor, every caregiver will have the same in their worlds." This is just one example, but you will hear a lot of narratives like that coming out of leadership from the technology industry. And these narratives are a highly effective marketing strategy. AI companies have raised hundreds of billions of dollars, as Luke mentioned, in venture capital. And capital expenditures on AI right now are about 40% of the US economy. But there's a big problem with these narratives, as you're probably coming to realize already in this session. What I want to focus on is how they smuggle in false assumptions about human nature that paint a really pessimistic picture of what we are all capable of. Or in other words, techno-optimism is actually human pessimism. To explain what I mean, I will use two case studies. And the first one builds on Anat's wonderful presentation yesterday about empathy and AI. And Anat showed us really important work showing that, on the one hand, chatbots are really good at simulating human expressions of empathy over a text interface. But the other hand, most people actually really prefer to receive empathy from a human. I want to zoom out a bit and think about how this empathic AI is being marketed to us. There are tens of millions of people already using both specialized products like Replica and AI therapy bots, as well as general purpose apps like ChatGPT for therapy and for companionship. And if you look at the advertisements for products like these, they are touting the many benefits of getting empathy and support from a chatbot, including, it's a lot of work to empathize with other people. Many of us just don't have the time. And wouldn't it be awesome to outsource our compassion to other people? There's even a company that has developed a chatbot that will call your elderly parents for you so that you don't have to call them. And, there's so much loneliness in the world. There's a loneliness epidemic. And, even if people do prefer to receive empathy from a chatbot or from a human, isn't some empathy, even if it's deficient, better than nothing? And, what about all the people who could never have friends, right? There are people who, elderly people or disabled people, these are actual claims being made right now that, they're just never going to have friends, so we should give them chatbots. That's the compassionate thing to do. I hope you're understanding how dark of a vision this is for all of us, right? To characterize compassion as hard work that we would rather avoid neglects all the benefits that we know about for showing up for the people we care about. Both modern science and ancient Buddhist teachings tell us that compassion, it's one of the illimitables. And the more that we invest in it, the more we cultivate it, the more of it we have to give, not less. And this idea that a chatbot friend is better than nothing paints a false picture of scarcity. It suggests that our only options, ultimately, are chatbots or nothing. But we know that it's possible for us to cultivate compassionate, nourishing human relationships. There's no fancy technology that this requires. And to give up on entire groups of people, to say that they are beyond hope and the best we can do for them is give them a chatbot friend, that's not compassionate. That's pity. And we all deserve better. In other words, there's nothing wrong with human compassion that chatbots can fix. This technological solution only seems appealing because of the unjust social systems which don't leave enough room or time for compassion to really flourish the way that it can. Ironically, the same technologies that are posed as a solution to the loneliness epidemic, in fact, reinforce the very same conditions that caused the epidemic in the first place. Industry leaders also tell us that AI will replace human scientists. So we have Eric Schmidt, for example, the former CEO of Google, writing in 2023 that eventually much of science will be conducted at self-driving labs, automated robotic platforms combined with artificial intelligence. Now, some people are enthusiastic about AI scientists because they argue human minds are really deficient. For example, we have limited capacities to process large amounts of information. We get tired, we can't work 24 hours a day, and we bring our messy personal biases into research that really should be objective. AI is positioned as a solution to these shortcomings of human scientists. Now, in our culture, when we picture a scientist, we often picture a lone genius with crazy hair toiling away in a basement somewhere, working out mathematical equations late into the night. And with this received picture of science from our culture, it makes sense that we might be tempted to think that a superhuman automated version of this would be an improvement. It could work 24 hours a day. It could be more productive. It could do these vast calculations in mere seconds. But I want to argue that this narrative relies on a wrong view of what science actually is. And what we've known for decades now, and we really have to credit feminist philosophers of science and feminist anthropologists, is that science is a highly social process. Scientists make knowledge together in communities, and the most creative and innovative science comes from diverse teams whose members come from different backgrounds, different trainings, different lived experiences. In other words, the types of groups that Mind and Life has been bringing together for the past several years, and the group that we've brought together here in Dharamsala. The individual perspectives that scientists bring to the research process, what some might call bias, are actually an essential part of knowing the world together. The humanness of human scientists is not something we would want to automate away. This is an essential feature of how we come to understand the world. I love this image from my friend, the feminist philosopher Brianna Toole, who writes that a community of knowers is like an orchestra producing a symphony. Just as each instrument adds beauty and texture to a wall of sound, knowing the world is a group project, and everyone has something to contribute. If science today is limited, it's not because our human minds are fundamentally limited. It's because our scientific communities aren't diverse enough. No technology can solve this complex social problem. And as long as we continue to imagine science as the purview of lone geniuses who are good at math, whether that's a human or a machine system, we are going to continue underestimating and underutilizing the human potential that we have to bring to science and knowledge. What both of these case studies teach us is that optimism about AI emerges from a wrong view of human beings, a view that neglects our fundamental interdependence. Compassion is not something that can exist outside a relationship between two living, breathing humans, and we shouldn't talk about it as if it can. The idea that a chatbot could be compassionate or a friend distorts our collective understanding of what compassion is and what friends are. And science is not something that can thrive outside of a community. And so to consider scientific knowledge as something that a machine alone can discover distorts our view of how to do science well. The stories that we tell now about AI and about ourselves ultimately help create the world that we all live in. And as many others have said, it's easy to feel powerless in this moment, like the futures that are being portrayed by the AI industry are inevitable and we have no choice but to prepare ourselves. But in fact, these stories are still being written and they are collective. Writing the future of this technology in our world is something we do together, and one that I hope that you will all think of contributing to. Thank you. Finally, Jinpa.
Good morning. It's a real joy to be part of this amazing panel, and my job has been made easy by my colleagues who have presented so rich kind of content already. My name is Thupten Chimpa. I had the privilege to be His Holiness's principal translator for nearly 40 years now. And in that role, I also happen to be one of the few people now who's been part of Minor Life since it began. So it's a real joy to be in this conference as well. My presentation will be coming more from the Buddhist perspective, I'll be speaking, in relation to narrative. I'll be speaking mostly about a few things. One is I want to invoke the principle of interdependence, which is a key principle in Buddhism, which is a key explanatory principle. And then I also want to kind of talk about what I see as a slippery slope of language in relation to AI and automation. And then I also want to talk about, one of the big debates that is going to come out of all of this is the nature of consciousness. How do we define consciousness? I want to bring the Buddhist perspective on that. And then I want to conclude by returning to compassion, because in the end, compassion has to be factored in. Because otherwise, why would we even invent something if it is not for humanity? So that's the kind of arc of my presentation. But before I get into that, I want to bring everybody's attention to something that I see as really core to any coherent systems of human creation, whether it is community, whether it is society. And there are three things which really need to relate to with each other. And I will call it the trio. So can I have the first slide? Yeah. So in almost every systems of ethics, whether religious or non-religious, humanistic, Buddhist, there's a recognition of an important relationship between knowledge and power on the one side, and responsibility on the other. So the sign in the middle is therefore sign, which is a kind of a logical notation. Now, one of the most worrying aspects of the technology, the digital technology, and we saw that in the social media phenomenon and increasingly the AI industry, is really the connection between the knowledge and power on the one hand and responsibility on the other. Either there is no acknowledgement of responsibility, or it's very fuzzy and confused, and part of that fuzziness is based upon a claim that this is a very infant technology. It's in the process of a growth. If we don't allow to do it, other countries and nations will take over. We are more liberal democratic values. We can be trusted. So there is all of that. So the responsibility is being shirked. And those of us who care about the future of humanity, like those in the room here, our job is to constantly remind those in the position of power and knowledge in creating this technology their responsibility. That, I think, is a crucial role we can all play. And now, in order to understand the responsibility, you need to really understand the principle of interdependence. Because, in other words, implications and impacts of what is being done. I, for one, believe that the emergence of AI today, partly a function of the increasing power of computation, machines and cloud systems, and all of this has really allowed this acceleration. And I'm not quite sure, whether I fully agree with you, Emily, whether this is yet another sophisticated level of automation, or whether there is a new reality that is emerging. I'm not quite sure yet. So in any case, a new reality is being created, and it's being created by a powerful forces with majority of us, 99.5% or 99.9% of us, we don't have a really say in this reality that is being created, which is going to, increasingly, when you open the computer up, AI application is being thrust upon us, and then often you don't see the, button that says switch it off. It's being shoved down under our throat, into our throat. So we are forced to live in this reality. If that is the case, then as consumers, as users, it's our responsibility to remind the responsibility. And for that, I think the implications, whether it is socio-economic implications, which is what worries me most, actually, the job losses and all of that, and who's going to be responsible for redressing that imbalance that is going to be created. There's a huge amount of implications. I think our job, whether it is philosophers, scientists, humanities scholars, or psychologists, our job is to remind constantly, shout, to really bring up this. So now the slippery slope is what worries me more in the immediate. So already, these are words that are being used already in relation to machine intelligence, memory, language, and even thinking machines. So a lot of people are not bothered when these terms are being applied to machines. Now, there are other terms which are increasingly, gradually being appropriated, which is troublesome. Desire, intention, autonomy, or in philosophical language, we will call it free will, and sense of self. That the fact that they're choosing to use first-person pronouns is in a kind of a implicit, sort of surreptitious way of getting into personhood, into the machine. Perception, emotions, like the the chatbot is trying to, mimic human emotions, being empathetic. And some of the early ones are very psychopathic. They always praises you. Oh, you are a genius. You're great. All of this. And then I see another set of terms which are even more important. There's mind, awareness, consciousness, and sentience. So I see those in a separate category. So yesterday, His Eminence Khyentse Rinpoche already told us a little bit about the problem of consciousness in English versus the Tibetan term that we have. But here also, I do want to bring attention to the researchers and philosophers as well, that we, especially the term consciousness, we need to be very careful about what we are talking about, because even in science of consciousness at the moment is in its infancy stage. And often when scientists talk about consciousness, they're talking about this aha moment. When is the first instant the person becomes conscious of something? That is not what Buddhism means by consciousness. So I think it's important, and the most important term in all of this is, for me, sentience. And sentience, we should never cross that line. We are going to attribute sentience to a machine. And the reason why it's a slippery slope is language matters. Once we start attributing these terms to machine, we get used to it, and Wittgenstein is right. The meaning of a word is its use. You will get to a point where it'll be too late to redefine these terms, since these terms would have been already misappropriated. And what happens is the two process. On the one side, the machines get more and more kind of anthropomized, with the attributions of human, attributes. And in the process, at the same time, the humans get devalued. So the net result is a horrible situation where, we don't know. We'll be confused about how to feel the other person next to you. I mean, that is a bleak scenario we'll be moving to. And we know from history, when humans dehumanize another human being, we are capable of horrific things. I mean, this is, well established by history. So this is something that I worry. And there are a lot of people here. There are also people from the, who are more direct, closer to the actual action of creating these machines in this room as well. I would like to really draw attention to that, Now, roughly, the Buddhist theory of consciousness, so when I say consciousness, it's not in the sense in which Western scientists mean at the moment. This is this broader underlying capacity for awareness. This is a model from a 7th century and 5th century Dignaga, and followed up by 7th century Dharmakirti. So essentially, the underlying reality of consciousness is really recognized as this subjectivity. This is what Western philosophers call qualia, what it is feel like to be someone. So that pure experience is the subjectivity, and phenomenally it manifests in two aspects. One is the object orientation, which is content related. You can access, where your objects turn into a content. And then the other one is the reflexive part. It's not reflective, it's reflexive, and it's simultaneous to the actual act of cognition. So I would argue that when, so for example, in these three, the computational model could probably capture the intentionality, the object orientation part. But at this point, conceptually, I can't see how the subjectivity and the reflexivity could be captured in a computational model or any theory of consciousness that is AI. And for the benefit of my Tibetan colleagues, where I'm getting these things, I just wanted to put the citations there, so I don't need to read this. The point I'm trying to make is that since how AI sort of moves in whatever direction, where the debate on the consciousness lands matters a lot to entire humanity. I think the resources that should be tapped into should not be confined just to Western, kind of dominant Western ideas. And particularly when it comes to, natural mind and consciousness, Buddhism is really rich. And to ignore that would be a tremendous loss, not just for the Buddhists, but for the entire humanity. So that's a main point I'm trying to raise. Now, in the end, I think all of this has to be underpinned by compassion. And compassion is a tricky word because we tend to use compassion primarily in concrete terms of an individual human's feeling towards another human being. But compassion can also be attributed to a kind of a systems or society where compassion can be taken as a standpoint from which we see things, which view things. So, and one of the important, aspects of that in a system or a society is that any system that is compassionate needs to have a mindset where a special attention is being paid to the vulnerable. And that is a fundamental requirement of a system that is compassionate. And then compassion is also one of the most powerful moral anchor. If you're confused what to do, what is the right thing, ask what is the most compassionate thing to do here. And it should be a guiding principle. It also should be in terms of measurement of evaluating whether it's going on the right direction or wrong direction. Compassion should play an important role. And it's also the best guarantor that whatever is being created is in the service of humanity. So to conclude, to sum up, I talked about knowledge, power, and responsibility, the principle of interdependence as key to appreciating that responsibility, slippery slope of language, particular role of consciousness from the Buddhist perspective, and the primacy of compassion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jinpa. We are going to take a 10-minute break now, so I would invite everyone to stand up, and we will reconvene in exactly 10 minutes from now. We'll have a panel discussion for about 25 minutes, and then after the panel discussion, we'll have another 30 minutes or so of Q&A from our audience. So already start thinking about what questions you might have for us. In particular, I would invite you to share stories that you've heard about AI that you would maybe like some help unpacking. But of course, you're welcome to ask anything that comes to mind. So I want to thank our panelists again for their wonderful and insightful remarks. And it's really great to see many diverse perspectives also coming together, aligning around several common themes that are emerging in our discussion. So to start, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to reflect a bit further about a first theme that's around the idea of inevitability. Jinpa mentioned that many of these AI products are being sort of forced on us without our consent. Emily had mentioned the ways in which narratives can take away our agency. So I'd just like to invite each of you, if you'd like, to reflect a bit more on, who do narratives of inevitability serve? Can we complicate them at all? What are the ways in which these futures of AI are not inevitable?
I'll jump in. Sometimes those narratives of inevitability are carried around by short little phrases. It's here to stay. The genie's out of the bottle. The horse has left the barn, right? The cat's out of the bag. We have idioms for these. And sometimes it's fun to just complicate the idiom itself, right? So the horse has left the barn. What farmer do you know who's like, bye, horsey? It's actually not the end. And I also think that it's worthwhile to think about other kinds of technologies. And I have two examples for you. The first one is the hole in the ozone layer, which was a really big problem when I was growing up. And guess what? The world came together with regulation that affected the actions of large corporations, and it's not a big problem anymore. So we have existence proof that we can come together on something. But also, I think we're in a particularly important moment with respect to these technologies, because as Jinpa says, they're being forced everywhere, where refusal is even more important. And the analogy that I like to bring up is plastic. Right now, it is very, very hard to avoid plastic. It is everywhere. It's incorporated into everything we use. And I think that means something about this moment with respect to this technology, that each act of refusal, each time we look at the narrative and say, no, actually, I don't believe that, is especially powerful right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think
You need to.
as I said also in my intervention, it's not inevitable the way things are going. But I tell this to my colleagues. We have to get to work on a different AI. Now, what that looks like, we don't know. But this is very urgent. So not continue to optimize, whatever parameter you have chosen for optimality, but to think from the perspective that we are developing here. And it all boils down to the same thing, to take humanity more seriously in what the applications do, how they interact, what data they are allowed to do, and things like that. And so I think also in technology, there's always a future where you have something different. And so now it looks like, wow, there's nothing we can do, right? It happens to us, and we have no say. We are victims. Well, yes, but it doesn't need to be. There's always in technology, IBM looked impossible to be, let's say, in the 60s or so, right? And then you had another company and another one and another one. And so the companies that will in 10 years dominate this field may not exist yet. So there's always a possible future, but we just have to imagine it and then build it.
Yeah. I mean, my own sense is that, especially I'm worried about the younger generation. I think we need to find a way to encourage critical thinking, so that your relationship with technology of this kind, which is the AI type of technology, is very intrusive. I mean, it's not a passive technology we can use, which is neutral, one could say. But since the social media phenomenon onwards, the digital technology is very intrusive and quite dangerous, because they are optimized to capture attention. And attention is generally, for we are vulnerable ourselves as human beings, either novelty or fear grabs our attention. That's part of our human psychology, which is the vulnerability that is being preyed upon. So I think just being able to, I think probably the education sector is one area where we could probably prepare. And, also as users, we have a choice to turn it off. And that's one of the things. Let me take this opportunity to request all the technology developers to, at least put a option to turn that off, and make it obvious, so that you don't have to look multiple layers to find that switch. I think those kind of things are really, really important, so that in the end, if it is a reality where only few people are living, that's okay. But it's a reality that is created for all, then we should have a say.
Thank you. Next, I want to pick up on this theme of dehumanization. And to explain what I mean, I want to go into some detail about a phrase that we've heard already yesterday, and I think we're going to hear more about later this afternoon. This is the idea of value alignment. So one thing that you might hear, a narrative that you might see a lot, is that AI technologies are going to be making decisions that affect a lot of people. Notice the inevitability that sneaks in there. AI is going to be making consequential decisions in healthcare and education and government. So in order to make sure that these are decisions that are not harmful, we need to encode, program, incorporate human values into an AI system. And there's a lot of research asking the question, how can we encode human values into AI systems? Now, I'm a moral psychologist, so I've been studying human values for many years. I'm, in fact, a professor in the Center for Human Values at Princeton. And when I hear this kind of language, my mind immediately goes to, why do you assume that human values could be programmed into a machine? And in the act of transforming human values into that which can be encoded, that which can be delivered in a computational model, that which can be programmed into a machine system, what do we lose? certainly there must be aspects of human values that do not lend themselves easily to encoding into a machine. And there's a worry that if we believe that this is possible and we talk about it as if it is possible, we then narrow our concepts of what human values are, what they encompass, by assuming that they can be delivered in a computational form. So that's something I worry about, and I'm hoping we'll get more chances to chat about this later throughout the week. But I'd just like to invite the rest of the panelists to reflect on that, maybe starting with Jinpa.
Well, yes, it is a worry, but at the same time, I'm a bit of a pragmatist, I suppose. If there's going to be these kind of machines that are becoming very ubiquitous, you might as well tap into anything that could be helpful as guardrails. So I don't know, encoding and replicating human value is probably not the right language I would use, but I would hope that there would be guardrails like concerns for the vulnerable, compassion, fairness, those kind of things could be put as guardrails. And also, like critical thinking, like chatbot at the moment, it's very, questions are being asked that are very personal. People are using it for self-affirmation, kind of a pseudo-therapist and so on. But increasingly, people will ask questions that are politically, challenging and polarizing. And what kind of response chatbot is going to give? So if the chatbot is going to go in the direction of social media, we are looking at a dark world, because it's going to amplify, reinforce the biases and prejudices and tribalism and all the rest. So here, I would hope that critical thinking, if there's part of the guardrails, if there's a critical thinking, and also rational and reasoning is not a single level linear. I remember I have people that I know, and we were talking about the value of geothermic as a kind of environmental benefits. And I remember this person told me, I have no kids, so it doesn't really matter to me. So it's a logical response. On the surface, it's a rational, logical response. But when you change the perspective and look at it from a broader perspective of human beings as a species, what we are doing to the planet is suicidal. It's totally illogical. So what may seem rational and logical at one level, when you change the scale and perspective, it looks irrational. So those things should be part of the critical thinking. And my hope is, as much as guardrails we can put that brings values and critical thinking aspects, it might do less harm. So maybe I've already given up on the question of inevitability.
Thank you, Jinpa. Luke, do you want to say a few words?
Yes. So value alignment, let's call it that way, is actually at the moment one of the big topics in AI research. And concretely, if any one of you is in a European AI conference next week in Bologna, you're welcome. Contact me. We have a workshop on this. Now, what is going on is very concrete studies, actually. For example, in end-of-life decisions in hospitals. And what people are doing is asking the question, what values? This is the first thing, right? And AI kind of can help to come up with the values, to help people to say, how exactly do we make decisions in this hospital, and how do you do it? And by let's say making it explicit. So this is one step. What are the values? Which is already a very difficult step. Now the second thing is then, if you have identified values, how do you link them to an AI system? And here there's a big difficulty with LLMs, because the LLM is an associative machine, actually. It's not a rational reasoning machine like the symbolic AI is. The symbolic AI system, you could just say, well, these are the rules you have to follow. But here the thing is wandering around, and we know that even if you define as prompts in the beginning, or you give guardrails, the system will move off and will not keep within those guardrails. So that's a fundamental problem, actually, with LLMs, which I think cannot be, well, it's not solved in any case. And then there's also the issue of enforcing of values. You know what? Also at these meetings, we get parents and teachers and educators, and they say, "Okay, we have these values, but we don't have the leverage to enforce them." And so this is again the I should say the irresponsibility of companies, that they will send an email to children of 13 years old. You know, do you want your parents to be control what you see, or don't you? Well, you can imagine what the children will say, right? but this is before 13. You know, the parents have that right. But after 13, you know, the companies themselves will say, now you have that right, you know, use it. Or the same thing with teachers in some schools or at the universities. They try to push AI usage in the system by certain deals they have made. And then so the you know, the educators, they say, no, we want the children to write their own essay, to think themselves without AI. And then from top down, they say, no, you should use it. So you actually give, you dismantle the autonomy of those who are supposed to be in charge and would like to be in charge, but they don't. And then I'm not yet talking about, you know, the president of a certain country, which will say, you know, if you introduce those regulations, I will hit you with tariffs for, you know, 100% tariffs.
Thank you. Yeah, that we could talk a lot longer about that, but I think we'll move on to Emily.
So just very briefly, I want to say, Molly, I completely agree with you that framing human values as something that can be encoded in a machine is dehumanizing, because our values are so central to who we are, and turning them into something that could be computed minimizes that. At the same time, I hear the conundrums that you're bringing up, Luke, and Jimpala, your point about compassion being really important rings very, very true. And the way that I see to resolve this paradox is by always keeping the people in the frame. So to come back to the sentences that you started us with, one of them was something like, AI is going to be making decisions. And you picked up on the inevitability part of going to, but there's another thing happening in that sentence, which is that the agent is the AI. And if we rephrase that as people are going to be using so-called AI systems to make decisions, then we can ask about the sort of societal system level values that are encoded, and how do we bring compassion into those systems in terms of the way people are behaving, in terms of what we're doing in education, for example, in terms of how we handle the actions of large corporations. And I think that's the level at which we need to be thinking about values. And I'm very concerned about how much research energy is going into trying to push the output of the large language models one way or another.
Thank you.
So my next question is, if you were able to nominate some words or phrases that could fall out of use when it comes to AI, what would those be? Do you want to start?
This one's going to be unpopular. Artificial intelligence. It's an uphill battle, but I challenge you in your conversations today and tomorrow and the next few weeks, if you find yourself saying artificial intelligence, ask yourself, how would you rephrase that comment or question without that phrase? And what do you learn in that rephrasing?
Well, you know, it was almost called synthetic intelligence, but maybe you don't like that either. No, I would say that the word of the term which is should be banned is AGI, artificial general intelligence, with all the implications that this is going to be, you know, what we should strive for, and also what it's going to be. This is never going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I would like to see the word conscious and AI never to be used together. So that's like, not only should not join, but they should be actually kept quite far apart.
Maybe-
And
maybe-
your
What about you?
So, I mean, I mentioned this in my talk, but I think I would like to see retired this sort of justification that this AI product is better than nothing. So we see this with AI companions. We see this also a lot with AI for education. There's a lot of optimism for building chatbots that we could send out into the global south, into countries that lack resources for education. And the logic there is like, well, there aren't enough teachers to send to India, Africa, South America, and wouldn't it be better than nothing for these students to have a personalized chatbot tutor? And the idea that nothing is the alternative is I think it forecloses our ability to imagine futures where there are in fact the resources to support good human educators, therapists, companions for everyone. It's false to assume that there's scarcity there. There's only a perceived scarcity because of billionaires hoarding resources. And so I would like to retire the better than nothing logic. So we have a little under 10 minutes left for our panel. So to close, I would just like to invite all of our panelists to share sort of some positive visions for stories you'd like to see told about AI and the kinds of futures that we could get to. And just to give a flavor, I actually really love the last chapter of your book, so I'm stealing this from you if you were going to say that. But, I think there's a lot of promise in using automated systems for really highly localized, community-driven tasks, right? And this is a counter to AGI, right? And in contrast to the godlike, omniscient, technology that can solve all our problems. Like there are really highly specialized use cases that we can get from automated systems. They don't necessarily cost a lot of money to build or deploy. And I would love to see more dialogues and imagination around like how can we take machine learning, deep learning, transformer models and localize them into really like valuable projects that serve the people who are building them.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning the book. If people want to hear more about how I think about artificial intelligence, I have a book that's linked in the resources for this event that is co-authored with the sociologist Alex Hanna called The AI Con. And I meant to mention it before, so thank you. The alternate futures that I want to see actually, this I think resonates a lot with what you were saying in response to the better than nothing trope, is I want to hear narratives that actually decenter the technology and move away from understanding social systems like education, health, and just our networks of community as necessarily impoverished or something that's missing something that needs a technological fix, and instead seeing these things as sites of rich human potential. And then if we choose to do something with technology, it's just sort of an afterthought, really. And as you're saying, Molly, localized and in the control of the people who it is built for and the people who it's being used on. So coming back to this focus on the most vulnerable, these are often the people who are not using the technology, but having it applied to them. So narratives around, when you talk about human-centered design a lot in these contexts, I was at the UNESCO Digital Learning Week last month in Paris, and everyone was talking about their human-centered approaches to artificial intelligence and education. And in very few of those talks was the possibility of not using this technology on the table. And it seems to me if the technology is necessarily there, then you've got a technologically centered narrative rather than a human-centered one.
Thank you.
Yes. I think what we need is a real meaning shift. And this has happened in the past. I'll give an example. In the 1970s, computers were still very much like calculating machines that, only the chosen were able to touch. And then there were a number of people, and one of them was Alan Kay. And Alan Kay had this idea: we should develop the computers to empower children. And so then he started this project at Xerox PARC in Palo Alto. And out of that came all sorts of ideas about Windows, about the mouse, about personal computers. And of course, today, all of us have tablets. But this perspective of saying, how can we empower children? That changed everything. And then there was also around the same period, Seymour Papert, who was a professor at MIT on education and computers. And he also changed completely perspective. Instead of using programmed instruction methods, he said, let's take the children as the source of creativity and use their energy, empower them to play with Logo and to learn how to program, learn about mathematics by building things. And so I think for AI, we have to think about how we're going to do this. But, we need this meaning shift from this all, AGI is coming and utopia will happen to how do we empower, well, I say children because they are the most creative species on Earth, right? I mean, much more creative than adults. So if we can empower them, this will change things, and it's a possible perspective.
Thank you. My own sense is that, I do a lot of translation work because of the translating with holiness, but also I do a lot of textual translation so I think a lot about language. So I think, going back to the slippery slope of language, I think we should never cross the divide between machine and humans. And this is where I think this whole direction of conscious AI and all of that, person, AI as a person, all of this is very, very dangerous. So I think whatever we do, we have to make sure. And then sometimes the technology gives us a false promise that, already the boosters are saying that we are going to get into utopia, but we know from history, even though the technologies makes us more efficient, it doesn't give us more leisure time. There's a Tibetan saying, I bought a horse so that I will have more leisure time, but it takes me more time to look after the horse, kind of thing. So technology is always shifting the goalpost. So I think we should not be too kind of fascinated and taken away by this efficiency language. And efficiency, these days, when we say efficiency, people are talking about speed. It has nothing to do with efficacy. The meaning of efficiency has already been changed. So I think this constant drive for speed, getting things done faster, I don't quite see the point. And in the process, you lose all the richness. Already in the earlier panel, they spoke about, empathy, trying to get empathy from a machine so that you don't have to pay the costs. Because, when you care about someone, there's some cost involved. You have to make a fuss about that person's problem. You have to show up. If you remove all of that out, there's no human connection. So I think this is where I think watching out for language is really crucial, because by the time you get to a point where we, without blinking our eyes, use these terms to machine, it's too late. So that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you so much. Let's give a hand to our panelists. So now we move to Q&A, and Gabor is going to be
Okay.
moderating. I'd just like to ask the question askers to say your name, your sort of background, perspective you're coming from, and if you want to direct your question to a specific one of us, please share that. Thank
Sure.
you.
So there are so many hands up. I would like to ask you all to ask very, very short, specific questions and address it to address the panelists.
And if we can all go to essence, so that we can leave time for as many questions as possible.
And because we have so many hands up,
Yeah.
I would just like to make sure that everyone has one question, not two or three. Okay? So maybe start with Geshe-la.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me opportunity again. I'm Geshe Samten Gyaltso, the director of Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, Dharamsala. So my question again going to AI, the capability of AI specifically. We humans, sometimes we write poems, sing a song, cook up food based on our emotion, our feeling, our desire. So AI, that's kind of a capability to write poems. Someone already mentioned about AI robot can write poem, right? So that's poem write by AI based on what? Based on someone's requirement, someone ask it, or it's right point itself. Best. So if it's so, then why it's right the point and best what? Based on what?
Based on what?
This is my question. Thank you.
I think you're the one who talked about the poem. Yeah.
Oh.
The robot's poem.
Well, I'm not sure I got the point actually.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get poetic language coming out of one of these systems, a large language model, maybe inside a robot like Luke's, or maybe just on a computer screen, it's coming out because there was similar poetic language in its training data. And something about the prompt that was put into the system led to those words being the likely next words. From my perspective as the daughter of a poet, I think poetry is very much about form, but it's about more than form. As you're saying, it's about what the poet wanted to convey. And when we have something that is poetic coming out of one of these probabilistic systems, it's coming out without that intent. We might still find it beautiful, but I think that to Jimpulo's points earlier, calling that poetry is going to be cheapening what real poetry is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan, you didn't get the chance yesterday, so now you get the chance.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. My name's Jonathan. I run a company called Mind Over Tech, which actually is trying to teach critical thinking about how to use technology more intentionally. I'm also a fairly undisciplined Buddhist practitioner. My question was to you, Tut and Jimpa, and it was actually a question about how we might go about safeguarding words like consciousness and sentience. And maybe like a bit of a devil's advocate question, because you presented these three kind of core components of consciousness, so intentionality, reflexivity, and subjectivity. And you said maybe intentionality can be simulated. I'm anticipating people saying, well, what if in 10 years' time, with intense effort from companies, you can somehow bootstrap reflexivity and subjectivity? I wonder if there is a Tibetan Buddhist understanding of mind, a philosophical refute to the idea that even in that instance, something approximating a quality of the nature of mind is not possible within a system like that.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think underpinning all of this is the word sentience. And sentience is defined in terms of an organism that has the capacity to feel pain. And I can't imagine AI machines ever getting to that stage. I mean, maybe down the line, sort of biological, synthetic, computer, I mean, you never know. But I mean, the sentient is the most important word that underpins all of that. And of course, the theory of consciousness has some aspects like, for example, there is a kind of envisioned a possibility through practice. You are getting to a point where you can experience content-free, pure luminosity. So those things are very difficult to imagine to be replicated in any machine form. So I don't worry about that, but I worry about the misappropriation of the term. I don't worry about the machine being able to capture and reproduce. That is not a worry for me. My worry is more about the language side. Thank you.
And let me see the hands and see if we can have some diversity. You. Yes. Just want to make sure that there is enough diversity in the room.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Doris Chang. I'm speaking from the positionality of a clinical psychologist. And I would like to invite in the user into this conversation because I feel like so far we've been talking sort of up here and talking about those people, those poor people that need this or use it. So I work with a lot of patients who are increasingly talking about why they're using AI. And they're using it in interesting ways, including dating, texting. Oh, somebody sent me this text. What should I say? They're turning to Chat GPT in particular to guide their communications to find human connection. I think it connects to a psychological impulse. We can speak to the algorithm and the interfaces that it sort of satisfies this human desire for controllability. It's so sanitized. It gives us this illusion that this answer is going to be better than what we could have come up with ourselves. So I would like to, Molly in particular, hear you speak a little bit about what happens to the self or self-concept when we are passing off AI-generated solutions as self-generated. What does that do to our human-human interactions? And what does that do to how we view ourselves?
Thank you so much for that question, Doris. That is a really, really insightful way of understanding this big set of issues. And I wish we had Anat also up here on the stage, and I'm hoping we'll be able to have lots of conversations about this. So, I mean, the thing that I think concerns me the most is that, yes, it is absolutely true that many people using chatbots for companionship, for advice, for therapy, find tremendous value in them. There are millions of people using these products. And I don't want to discount that. I want to take that really, really seriously. And it's also the case that the people who tend to find the most use in these products are often at the margins of society. So people who have mental illnesses, especially conditions like borderline personality disorder, where it's really, really difficult to find trust with another human, and there's a security in the constancy of a chatbot. Or I've read an account by someone who's homeless, and because homeless people are so dehumanized, they are able to find connection with a chatbot, which is their only option. You ask about sort of what it does to ourselves to use these products and to sort of take the role of socializing with a machine as opposed to another person. And this is still a very new area of research. Others have mentioned the risks of psychosis and suicidal ideation that has been egged on in some cases by the chatbot interaction. There's currently a lawsuit against OpenAI by the parents of a teenage boy who died by suicide through interactions with ChatGPT. But taking seriously the experiences of users, I think we can imagine this as a kind of social dilemma, where on the one hand, in the short term, users are finding real value in interactions with chatbots, but at a cost. The cost at a longer term, both to themselves and to society more broadly. So at the cost to oneself, I just read an article in The Guardian about a new phenomenon called chat phishing, whereby some users of dating apps are using ChatGPT to seed an interaction with a potential partner, and then they show up to meet each other in person, and there's actually no connection there because you meet the person that you've really connected with, but then they can't actually reproduce in person the language that the chatbot produced for them. And that obviously really damages trust in general, and it's not going to serve the user over time if they ultimately want to connect in person with another human. But I mean, zooming out, what concerns me most, I think, are about the long-term cultural effects of outsourcing a lot of our social relations to chatbots, and in particular, the constriction of diversity that comes from replacing all of the varied and rich and idiosyncratic and sometimes unskillful human interactions that we all produce, and homogenizing that into the next most likely predicted word. There's some troubling research by Tarleton Gillespie, who looked at various chatbot products on storytelling and asked, can you tell me a story about two people who meet and fall in love? And he very intentionally did not mention the gender or sexuality of the characters that he wanted the story about. And in 99% of cases, the chatbots returned a story about a straight couple, a man and a woman. And so what we have is these sort of like dominant, hegemonic understandings of what society is, of what relationships could be, about what a good interaction looks like. And that is getting channeled through the interaction with the chatbot. And so, the loss of relational diversity that I think is at stake here is something that we all should be worried about, and something that I think really outweighs any genuine but temporary benefit that an individual user would get from such an interaction.
So now, please. Here. And then I would like to invite Chris and Peter. I know that we have a written question and that we will have
At some point.
At some point, yes.
Sure.
So after you, Chris and Peter, and then some of them over there. Yeah, I will come back to you. Short questions, please.
Thank you. Greetings to all from TCV, Tibetan Children's Village. I'm Kelsam Pinto from TCV. I just wanted to share my opinion regarding, I vote for Tudan Jimbala regarding the education for the children, bringing awareness about the good and the bad of AI. So this is one thing that we should do it. Then also, I think Mind and Life plays an important role of educating this, because we, for the past 1 days and today, we have been hearing about the good and the bad side of the artificial intelligence. So therefore, bringing awareness to the young mind is very important. This I would like to first. Now the second, that is my question. Is there a regulatory body that, so that in the worst case scenario where robots invades human, right? So this is my concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. And I think it is very important that, given that this technology is being forced down everyone's throats, that children are given the opportunity to learn to think critically about it. I think that is super important. I worry very much about the people selling the doomerist narratives, robots are going to kill us all, capturing the attention of the regulators, who then have less time to spend on worrying about shoring up journalism against all of this synthetic text in the world, about shoring up workers' rights in light of labor exploitation, about shoring up environmental protection in light of the devastation that comes with e-waste, with data centers, and so on. And so I hear the fear about a robot invasion, and it is fun to think about, but I think we should keep that away from the policymakers.
Chris, please. Peter, after that.
Hi, I'm Chris Scammell. I used to work for an AI safety company, and now I'm running a small program called the Buddhism and AI Initiative. I wanted to bring in a feeling around this, which is profound grief. I'm upset that we have to have this conversation. And it's a very difficult world we're living in and facing such a significant challenge with AI coming so fast. That's the robot invasion that I feel. It's not a particular technological breakthrough. It's, whoa, what is this energy? All the hands in the room. And the question suggests that there's profound energy behind this moment in time. So my question to you, Molly and Tugten, is how can Buddhist practice help us compost these feelings, which, when uncomposted, lead to nihilism?
Wow, thank you for that question. I'll just answer very briefly, which is just, Buddhist practice helps us stay present with the uncomfortable. And I think a lot of the optimism that we see around, AI can offer us a utopian future is a mechanism of escape from dealing with the deep grief and discomfort around the harms that AI systems and companies are doing right now.
Thank you. Well, I mean, briefly, I think, one of the things that we would hope is that, the people who are producing this technology, in the end, they do tout the benefit of the humanity, because that, otherwise they can't sell it. So I think we should use that as the kind of the conduit through which to force them to live up to what they really mean, and then pointing out the harmful consequences of some of the choices that are being made. And I think for Buddhists, I think it is two things. One is we need to come up with our own ability to regulate our grief and emotion so that we don't become paralyzed and give up. So that's crucial. And that on that front, Buddhism is very rich. It gives us a lot of tools. But I don't think that's adequate. We need to also then move from there to do something. We have to feel agentive. So that's the key point that came up, that we should not give up our agency. So that we need to feel empowered. And, there is no inevitability. For example, I remember a couple of years ago, people were talking about multiverse. Where is the multiverse now? So technologies may seem very seductive at one point because there is a lot of money being thrown in it. There is a lot of coverage. And here sometimes the journalists are not very responsible. That those who cover the stories get so enamored and fascinated by this amazing kind of, thing, then they don't act responsibly. So I think this is where, just because something is like LLM or Chat GPT is right now so ubiquitous does not mean it's here to stay. At some point, the market forces will play its part, and plus and minus, and each individual is going to make the choice. So just as multiverse quietly disappeared, some of these met cloak. So I don't think, we should assume this is here to stay, at least the specific forms of AI.
Thank you. Peter, please. Yeah, I see the question. Then I would like to invite Jack Cornfield and maybe Francesco. Very shortly, please. I want to make sure that those who haven't spoken yet can have a say.
My name is Peter Ackerman, and I'm a modest investor in new technologies. My question is to one of the panelists and to hopefully one of the person in the room who can speak on behalf of the companies that create the new technologies. Emily, you said that we have to bring the humans into the frame. I'm interested in the point of view of those companies that develop the new technology. How comes the human into the frame for you? Is it a product? Is it the resource to collect data? Or what exactly is it?
Luke?
I think, Luke, you should. Yeah.
You go first.
So very briefly, I think that a lot of the narrative work that companies are doing is pushing the people out of the frame. And in particular, they're pushing the people who have done the work to create the data that they are using to train their systems are made invisible. And the people who are making the design choices are made invisible. Every time people say AI is like this, they are hiding the intentions of the people who made those design choices and making it look like a naturally occurring and therefore inevitable phenomenon.
Maybe we can also ask the gentleman back.
Luke, you want to say?
No, it's fine.
Sure. Okay.
Maybe we can ask the gentleman behind over there.
Jack.
No, before Jack, because Peter's question was also addressed.
Excuse me.
And Neil.
Excuse me.
Yes, because Peter's question was also addressed to one of the company
There's
founders here.
no possible way I can address this in a short amount of time. I would do it injustice. So I'm happy to do it another time, maybe in the summary, but I cannot now.
Thank you. Jack.
First of all, I really appreciate the intelligence of the panel. It's a different kind of intelligence, and it really makes us look and think anew. So that, but as I listen to what you talk about, I feel like in the using of AI and kind of describing the dilemma we're in, that it's also a social critique, and a very deep one. And it heightens the grief that was just talked about, because we all know about the inequality in the world, people who are starving, and then the grain elevators full of food elsewhere, the kind of injustice, the kind of concerns about climate change and, disconnection from one another, all of that. And they're really a reflection of late stage capitalism, right? And its problems. So in a way, in this room, half of what you're talking about wasn't named explicitly, but it is the problems that we've created a global system of exploitation and late stage capitalism. So that's the first just observation. And just to name, in honor of Joanna Macy, who died recently as a friend, she talked about despair and empowerment work, that the question of grief then comes, can we feel it, and then can it empower us to make a difference? The question I have for you, hearing through that even bigger lens, it's not AI, it's what we have created as human beings, as late stage exploitive capitalism. Don't we have to name and address this? Or how do we name and address this? Because it's overarching most of the questions we're talking about. How do you see this?
Do you want to start?
Luke, you want to?
Luke, you had a slide on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I very much agree that you're putting your finger on the right spot, and of course this is something that is beyond the power of most of us, right? So of course we can give our opinion as we did today. In most meetings about AI, there's a very different kind of discourse, and I think we need to incorporate this criticism as part of our practice and teach to our students, and yeah.
I want to bring up that this idea actually is very important. When I encourage you to rephrase away from artificial intelligence, one example of that was a question that Mark asked in his presentation, which is something like, how do we thrive together with artificial intelligence existing in our world? And if you rephrase that as, how do we thrive together with massive multinational corporations and concentrations of wealth existing in our world, I think it becomes very clear that we don't want to accept that presupposition. Why do we have to accept that as a given? Why can't we work against that? And you mentioned that individually we don't have much power. So the answer is solidarity, to band together.
I want to change the order of speakers because Anil didn't have a chance to speak. So please ask your question. You did want to ask a question. Anil.
Anil, oh, sorry.
Look, this is the most provocative, fascinating, and frustrating session I've probably been a part of in recent history, from my own experience. I can't do this shortly, but I'm going to give a point of view. Look, I'm an AI CEO who would rather not see advanced AI systems exist in the world. I do use the phrase, the genie is out of the bottle, because I don't think we're putting them back in. For any given set of facts, there are multiple true stories. I think we choose because of parsimony, utility value, aesthetics, social value. Some facts. Right off my smartphone. Top 10 market cap companies in the world. NVIDIA, 4.6 trillion. Microsoft, 3.8. Apple, 3.7. Alphabet, Google, 2.9. Amazon, 2.3. Meta, 1.8. Broadcom, 1.7. Saudi Aramco, 1.6. TSMC, 1.5. Tesla, 1.5. 8.5 are either have their major business line or majority of their business lines connected to ML and or AI. $7.4 billion smartphones in the world, 5.3 unique users, 6.4 hours a day on average used in front of screen time, majority on phones. US 7 hours a day, Brazil, Philippines, South Africa, significantly more than that. Waymo, in my hometown of San Francisco, 100,000 rides per week. 1 in 4 of rideshare and or taxi rides is Waymo. Doubled in 1 year. Truck drivers, 1.2% of the workforce. Manufacturing, 10% of the workforce. Lost 5 million jobs since 1990. 5 million more will be lost in the next 5 years. This is not inevitability. I don't know what inevitability means. Nothing's inevitable. This is what's actually happening now, right? So Meta, 3.5 unique users a day across platforms, not to speak of Google, et cetera, et cetera. Look at the Nobel Prize this year, last year, all related to disruptive economies, inequity, et cetera. This, I think, yeah, look, Mark Andreessen, you're never going to get me to argue that his tech utopia narrative is positive. Wealth inequity, one of the greatest cancers of our time, right? But I think it's almost equally dangerous. With respect, Molly, you may have been an offhanded comment, but tech optimism equals human pessimism? Come on. We can't take a narrative as a zero-sum game. What about the narrative that says we might actually be able to co-evolve human systems and technological systems that enhance net flourishing? AI systems that are conscious? Frankly, an uninteresting conversation to me. AI systems that instantiate human values? Frankly, an uninteresting conversation to me. Whether we call it AI, synthetic intelligence, uninteresting conversation to me. We're building, among many, many, many others, are building the next generation of symbolic, semantic intelligence systems. And they're holy shit capable. They scare the hell out of me because of their general purpose capabilities. Luke, I take your point. We're trying to build better AI. Our point of view is it's an ecological disaster, it's a people disaster, and these are giant black boxes you can't look inside of and interpret. We want highly transparent, interpretable AI. You can't have AI safety at all without that. We want orders of magnitude more efficiency. We want breakthrough capability. So we're pinning so many of these conversations to LLMs. LLMs will be ancient technology soon. It's not the inevitability of the future I care about. It's the fact that it's already everywhere and we don't even realize it. And it's disrupting our minds, our capital systems, our workforces, and we must do it better. I want that conversation. That's why I came here. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to address it?
Yeah.
Just please briefly, because we have run out of time.
So thank you so much for raising that. And I do want to say that my view that techno-optimism often smuggles in pessimism about humans is not an offhand comment. It's actually a deeply thought out position based on my scholarship over the last 20 years. And I'd be happy to send you more reading to do if you'd like to continue that discussion. But I hear you, and I think that we are all here because of the grief and the worry and the overwhelm and the frustration that is at front of mind for all of us. And our goal today, and I hope we've been successful, is to just name where that's coming from and offer alternatives. And so I'll just end with a quote from someone far wiser than me, the late anthropologist David Graeber, who I really wish was still here with us to help think through this moment. And he says, "The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make, and could just as easily make differently. So I'll leave everyone with that.
Thank you.
I see another entrepreneur who wanted to say something, and I hope it's short, and then we will need to finish. Angus, please.
Thank you. My name is Angus Penniman. I'm an investor in early stage technology companies. Firstly, thank you for everything that you said today. Just some very quick points I'd like to share. Emily, some of your comments with regard to machine learning, I think are very important. A number of companies that are coming through are about machine learning and are creating employment. With regard to, for example, Molly, we have some businesses where we've hired over 20 PhDs and who have a lot of freedom to create this next generation. Also, for people who perhaps have less academic qualifications, we're creating a lot of employment for those people as well. Jimpa, with regard to language, I'm British, so I'm cautiously optimistic about everything. There are ways we're trying to address language with regard to guardrails and things like that, such as in AI, which you're aware of, Amir. They're at a very early stage, but the input of people such as yourselves in Mind and Life and within the Tibetan Buddhist community is absolutely vital. So please, my comments are, let's stand up and let's create what we would like to create for all of us. Thank you.
Together, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. I think we can end here, and we will be back at 1 o'clock. Very short lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.